Hey, welcome to another episode of I See Data People, and I'm joined here with Ed Lavery and Evan Schniedman. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So, Ed is the man who needs no intro, but I'll do it anyway. I first met Ed when he was already at his current role at SimilarWeb, but Ed actually started his career outside of the data industry. He had the right frame of mind to start and lead the investors business in SimilarWeb for the last 5 years. How did your background outside of the data ecosystem set you up to start SimilarWeb investors business?
Sure. So I wouldn't say I've had a conventional background at all. I studied classics in the UK. So for those of you that don't know what classics is, it's the highly relevant degree of ancient Greek and Latin. So I went from classics thinking I was going to be a lawyer. That didn't work out. So I worked in investment banking for a couple of years doing M&A. I would say that's where I got my finance experience from, although I did not enjoy those 2 years that much. And I see myself as a bit of a creative person. And I felt that that was not the right industry at all. After that, I went to Phillip Morris, which is a cigarette company. I worked in the e-cigarette division and I was trying to figure out how large the e-cigarette market was in the UK. We knew it was about 50% of the industry. Came across a company called SimilarWeb, which happens to be where I am now. And using their free product at the time, which was amazing, I was able to use their data to basically estimate the revenue of all the e-cigarette companies in the UK. I went to my superiors and said, like, isn't this amazing? You could scale this to every single e-cigarette company or even potentially public company in the world. They looked at me blankly as think not understanding at all what I was saying. Anyway, I thought I may be onto something here. That if I could figure out the revenue of an e-cigarette website, I could potentially figure out the revenue of real time of any website like an Amazon or a Netflix. And this was back in 2015, 2016, realized that no one in the hedge fund industry was really using this data properly. So I actually sent a message to the CEO of SimilarWeb on LinkedIn saying basically, hey, can I pitch you an idea? Within half an hour, I was on a call pitching me the idea. Met him 2 weeks later in London, brought a couple of slides, had a job offer to basically figure out how to build an investor business at SimilarWeb. He didn't actually ask my background at all until right at the end of the thing. And he said, what did you do beforehand? And when he quickly realized that I had no data experience, he was like, what the hell have I just done? So anyway, so I joined the company 6 years ago and have really helped spearhead building SimilarWeb into one of the leading alternative data brands selling to the hedge fund space. And also P and VC space as well.
So Ed, you've obviously gone through the whole life cycle here, productizing data into a whole new market. What are the biggest challenges that you face in productizing data?
So I would say one of the biggest challenges is getting rid of the noise in data. So, and everyone has a different use case and everyone perceives different data points to be of different noise. So I can just give an example at SimilarWeb. So SimilarWeb was a company that originally sold web traffic data and keyword data to marketers and their referral data to affiliate marketers, sold many different data sets. But to investors, they only really wanted one thing or a couple of things, which is just looking at visits to a website or visits to a particular page. So I think it's really, really important to cut away that noise. And I think from a user perspective, people pay more for less. If you could give someone a very focused, targeted product, which is exactly what they need, what you're basically doing is saying or selling to your customer, we will do the work on our side. Do not spend your time, which obviously has a cost towards it, filtering out the noise. We will do it on our end. So the more focused the product you can sell without the noise that the customer doesn't need means that you can actually sell less for substantially more.
That is exactly on point for our next question. And that is, how do you think data insights should be priced?
Amazing. Well, I'm glad you asked that because I think I led into that one as well. So, I mean, this is an age-old question. I would say age-old. Data hasn't really been around that long at all, but maybe a question for the past few decades anyway. The real challenge with data is that everyone can assign a different value to data in general. A hedge fund has a totally different value of the same data set as maybe an SEO marketer or someone who is looking to expand into new market. And the reason for that is that data represents different ROIs depending on the user. And I do think it's actually fine to have a slightly different pricing structure based on maybe number of features or amount of data, depending on which industry and what user there is. But the way that I see pricing, I see there's three pillars in order to identify how you should value something and like what is it a premium product or a non-premium product. The first is, I would say, the accuracy of the data. Like, doesn't data actually trend against what it's meant to be trending? If there's not an accurate data source, then it's probably not that useful. And remember that everyone's version of accuracy is dependent on what they do. So if you're a marketer, your version of accuracy might be comparing to a website. If you're looking at opening new stores, your version of accuracy might be to footfall in your store. For a hedge fund, it's to what the company reports. The accuracy is one. The other two, I would say, is the uniqueness of the data. You might have the most accurate data, but like if maybe public data figures like GDP or something like that, or any government reports have the same information, same accuracy, that devalues that data as well. So it has to be tracking something that other data sets don't provide. That adds to the value of the price of it. I would say the third value pillar in terms of pricing is how many questions can it answer. So if this is a data set that can answer 100 questions, is unique and is very accurate, then you have a data set which is worth a lot of money. If this data set can only answer one or two questions, but to a very detailed level, I think it's important to kind of understand that as well.
Ed, you just alluded to combining data sets, using multiple data sets together. I guess I'm curious, how do you think about combining disparate alternative data sets? How effective is that? How do you go about that process?
So I would say there's a simple answer, and I guess there's a slightly more interesting answer. The standard answer, I guess, to something like that is understanding that the world is basically a mosaic of different data points in general. And just to give a very simple explanation, if you're tracking, let's say, a retailer, you might have credit card data that helps you understand the number of transactions. You might have geolocation data that helps you understand the number of people who go in. You might have web traffic data that helps you understand the number of people who are visiting that e-commerce site as well. So I think this is a pretty standardized way of understanding, I guess, like why it's important to have different data sets, because unfortunately there's no one size fits all. Where I do think combining data sets gets a lot more interesting, and I would say this is at the moment more the reserve for the more sophisticated data users. It's basically using different data sets to normalize and change the accuracy of existing data sets as well. So just to give an example of that. So you may be buying, let's say, a transactional data set or like a geolocation data set. And what you can start doing is bringing more different data sets around that, which are slightly different. It could be like a web traffic data, to normalize and change the accuracy or the predictiveness of the original data set as well. I definitely think there's more and more tools that are coming out on the market that can help people do that. But I definitely think that is one of the futures of the data industry. Those data vendors who can start inferring things from one data set using other data set, using kind of more complex algorithms.
Thanks, Ed. And I think you've been one of the most experienced alternative data entrepreneurs here in the industry. What's your most controversial opinion?
So my most controversial opinion, well, okay, I've got a lot of controversial opinions, but maybe I should spare these ones for this data conversation. So I would say, I guess in the data industry, when you're selling, people want everything, all the data that you offer at a very low price, but they want access to the data rather than mainly consumption. I think one thing that doesn't exist in the data industry, and I would love to see it exist, is rather than people either selling data by features or rather than people selling like an entire data set, like 500K or whatever, they give people access to all the premium data a data provider might have, but only charge people based on usage. I think one thing that the data industry hasn't developed yet but the cloud industry has developed is a consumption-based business model. So things like Snowflake, AWS, you're charged by the amount you use. And the business models there are to encourage maximum consumption as well. Where I think with data, it should be a similar model. I mean, you're using pretty similar systems and infrastructure as cloud computing. You should really be giving users access to everything. Yes, there might be some features that are a bit more valuable than others, but people should get access to everything from day one, and the model should be getting to use as much of that data as possible. I think the other controversial opinion on this, I think ultimately, people don't want multiple data sets. They just want one or two. And if one data set can tell you 75% of the story, do you really need to, how much incremental value is the second or third? So I think one of the biggest data winners will be the data sets that can be answered the most questions. But I think people in the future, they don't have time, they don't have the inclination to learn and understand multiple data sets. I'm saying this more from a mass adoption point of view, rather, I mean, I still think there'll be very sophisticated buyers out there who will still want many data sets, but I think from a mass adoption point of view, there only needs to be a couple of good ones.
So maybe I'm giving you a leading question here, but perhaps it's consumption-based data buying is going to be your answer. I'm curious, when you look out 5 years from now, what do you think the biggest change in the data industry is going to be?
So I think a consumption-based business model is definitely one direction. The other thing, I think generative AI, I hope I don't come across like a broken record, but everyone is talking about this. I think this is going to be the big game changer in the industry. The reason why, it's going to make everyone into data scientists. People that don't understand even basic statistics can now perform statistical models, apply machine learning at a basic to an intermediate level. This may not change, the more sophisticated users much, but what it will do as an entry point for getting new users into the data market, it will allow them to answer complex questions, will even give them the questions to ask, and it will also help them build statistical models to kind of almost a competitive way. So I think it's really going to level the playing field for non-sophisticated users, generative AI. And I think data vendors that can start integrating that kind of stuff, not just into their R&D process, but even to the user experience, are going to really, that would drive the adoption of these products as well. And I think that can also lead to that consumption model. And I think maybe this might be a controversial opinion based on my background as a classicist, but I think going in the future, if the basic skills can be shared by everyone in the industry based on AI, I think being a lateral thinker and having that almost kind of creative background combined with that technical expertise is going to put those individuals or differentiate those individuals as well. Because when you're working with data, it's not about just being technically apt. It's about being creative. It's about creating a story. It's about creating a narrative. So I think in the workforce, having a balance of people with a non-traditional data background, and I know I'm very biased and you led me in to be in this very biased conversation, I think is an important addition to, more technical teams or data-driven teams.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and experience with us. I think the mosaic of your life is a super interesting one. Looking forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.